name's Christa Smith, and I work at Sheridan College as the Director of Student Services now. But I lived in China for 12 years, and before that I was living in the States because I'm from the United States. And yeah, I'm married to an Australian whose family is from Perth, so now we live in Perth. I became a Christian quite young. I was around 9 years old, and we had gone to a sermon that day, and the pastor had said something in the middle of the sermon that really stuck with me, and had pointed out, I think, that even though I was going to church, I hadn't become a believer yet. I hadn't really committed my life to God, and so that was, I sort of understood that day. And I thought, boy, I really better do that because I want to do that. I think I was very blessed that the people around me who were Christians, they really demonstrated that while we're human and we're broken and we don't quite get it right all the time, that Christ could make that better, that He could cover over the things that we kind of mess up that in our humanness. And I thought that was something that I definitely wanted. And so my father and I were in the pickup truck that night, and I asked him about believing in Jesus and you know, what did you pray and how did you go about that, and lots of questions. And then that night when we got home, I sort of went off by myself in my bedroom and prayed to become a believer, and I think I told my parents a couple days later, but yeah. I taught at an international school, and I also worked with Chinese people as well. So I did some English conversation classes, and I made a lot of Chinese friends. And I also worked with international kids. So my classes were typically 70% Korean, and then around 30% a mixture of other countries, American, Canadian, Taiwanese, and Japanese, and just some other countries. So it was a really interesting class. I taught for about 5 years, probably in the classroom. And then at the end of that time, you know, I've had my kids, and it was getting harder to maintain teaching in the classroom, even just part-time. And I moved into a member care position where I was really caring for other team members and helping them through things, orientating them to life in China, and trying to make sure that while we're there together, that we're taking care of each other and that we're successful in being mentally and spiritually and physically well, which was a bit of a struggle, but yeah, but it was amazing and rewarding, and I love that, yeah. For me, cross-cultural work is actually when you're going into another culture and you're from a different culture and you're going to be working or helping in that culture. And I didn't go in to change the culture and think, in fact, I think it's interesting you asked that, because I think if anything, and especially my Chinese friends would say this, China changed me. I didn't change the culture of any of my Chinese friends. In high school, I can't really put my finger on it exactly, but I know that there was a time when I just felt that my life had gotten a little bit off track, and God made it clear that He wanted me in cross-cultural work, that He wanted me in another country, probably Asia, doing cross-cultural work. And I suppose you could say I recommitted at that point, or committed in a different way at that point to doing work for God and to helping people. And Yeah, and so from that point, which was my sophomore year in high school, I struggled a bit on that path. And then in university, I was very committed to that path. I stopped dating because I didn't want to date if the person I was dating wasn't going overseas. And I was sort of thinking that I might end up single. And then it was just gonna take so long. And I had a moment where I was praying to God and saying, you know, God, I might not get to be a cross-cultural worker until I'm like 40, which is funny because I'm 40 now. And I said, you know, I guess I need to accept that. I need to give that up and just say, when you have me over there, it'll happen. And the next day I met one of the leaders in the organization that I ended up going with. And yeah, and it just happened like that. A year later, I was in China teaching, and met my husband. And certainly, China was a huge growing experience. I learned my faith, my belief that God is definitely in control, and that we need to worry less and believe in Him more, grew exponentially in that time. I don't think I understood what faith meant when I went to China, but when I left China, I had a better understanding. I'm still working on it, but I had a better understanding. As a single, when I went over as a single woman, one of the hardest things was the loneliness. You don't have that natural inbuilt support system where you're partnering with somebody else. As a married, I think I was surprised because I was still lonely. Because, you know, your husband, while he's wonderful and fantastic man, he can't fill everything. And I think that was another place where I grew, where I learned that actually God has to be the center of everything. One of the difficulties, I think, for anyone going into cross-cultural work, and it's something I do some sessions on and stuff, is your physical identity. You perceive yourself a certain way, and your culture perceives you a certain way, and you enter into a new culture, and they perceive you in a different way. And that's quite challenging. So many rewards. I mean, personally, I think I became a better person. I grew up in China because I went to China when I was just barely 22 years old, and I matured so much there, and China gave that to me. And the wider perspective, looking at the world through different eyes, such a reward. And the faith and maturity it taught me, the patience it taught me, it was amazing in so many ways. So many people think that you sacrifice when you go overseas to do cross-cultural work, but actually, I think it just heaps gifts on you. It's not a sacrifice at all. You gain so much. I think that willingness is the first key. So I was reading a quote, and I don't remember the entire quote off the top of my head, or even the name, but it was the man who started the Salvation Army. And the start of the quote is, "Not called, do I hear you say? Not willing, I think you mean. Put your head down to the Bible and listen carefully, and you will hear the call of the people who need you to come." And that's not a direct quote. I can't remember the direct quote, but it was that effect. And I thought it's so true. If you ask any cross-cultural worker, anybody who sends people overseas, the first point is willingness. That if you do know, feel, or see a need, that you are willing to go and respond to that need. And as a high schooler, as a teenager, the first need I saw was the need for education. I saw commercials of women and small children, and knew that there were people who needed education, who needed love and care. And I was just willing to answer that call. So that's the first bit. And then after that, it really depends on your church and your organization. So I think your church should be very involved in the process and helping you go and decide what's needed and decide where you're going and what you're going to be doing. It should be a sending process. But I do think that a practical degree is good to have, or a practical skill. So plumber, architect, engineer, bricky, physiotherapist, somebody who's good with video and graphics, teachers, doctors. These are real skills, and that's really important. Process of kind of narrowing down which country you're going to and where you're going and what you're going to be doing. And really, I feel like that's a process for you and your family and your church to undertake together. And then your organization is really there to smooth the pathway and to provide support that if your church can't provide some types of support. Okay? Your organization is not the one sending you, it's your church. So they need to be the ones sort of sending you, and the organization should be the one smoothing those details out. I think it's important to be in some way a people person, to like people. I think that's important, of course. And like I said, some of my regrets were that I was not mature enough. And so maturity, for me, I really wish that I had been more mature. And so I just hope that people who do want to go will invest in their maturity and in training opportunities where they're available, and to please go overseas on a short trip before you go over on a long trip. And to invest in training as a team member, because being on a team is difficult work, and really functioning as a team and loving each other and caring for each other, that's hard. And so practice doing that is really, really good. Yeah, please do it. Yeah, I would say if you've met cross-cultural workers and you've talked to them and you say, what do you regret? What do you wish you hadn't done? And they'd say, nothing, I love going. Then it is something that you should certainly do. Yeah, please do it. Yeah.